Hello, everyone. Welcome to Build's first subcontractor meetup of 2025. My name is Mark Reyes. I'm part of the marketing team here at Build, and really excited to dive into what I think is a really great and important topic, and that is around some of the unhealthy growth practices that can hurt subcontractors and hold back their business, and also how you can avoid them and grow your business sustainably and ensure profitable growth. I'm joined today by a couple of excellent speakers. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So, as I mentioned today, we're going to cover some of the common growth mistakes that can hurt subcontractors and hold them back from their growth goals, which are so important. We're going to outline a strategy that can help you to establish processes to support sustainable and profitable growth. And we'll also talk about a approach to setting realistic growth goals and KPIs so you can create a plan that ensures you're on track to meet those growth goals. I'm joined today by Josh Luebker. He is the owner of Sulphur Prairie Management, as well as a fractional CFO, as well as Jerry Aliberti, who is the owner of Pro-Accel, a subcontractor and construction consulting services company. So let's go ahead and dive right in to some of the common mistakes that subcontractors make when they're trying to grow. And in our conversations, we identified these common growth mistakes, these 5 growth mistakes: relying too heavily on cash to fund projects and cover operational expenses, poor risk management and poor contract management, overcommitting resources leading to burnout and potentially turnover, not investing enough in construction technology, and then finally, not accounting for the cost of capital and including it in a bid. So, Jerry, I'd like to start with you. In our discussions with Josh as well as yourself, we kind of identified these as some of the most common growth mistakes that subs make. When you're talking to your clients, do you have any examples of these kind of coming into practice?
Yeah, so starting off with poor risk and contract management, it's a lot of contractors when they're grown, they feel that they need to conquer everything, right? So they fail at really understanding what they're great at and what they're not great at, and they start pursuing projects that are not aligned with their current staff and what they have available to them at the very moment. So what happens is they, going to the next bullet point, is they overcommit on resources, right? And their current resources start to feel overwhelmed. I mean, when I speak to a lot of clients, employees, when I just start working with them, I would say one of the top 3 complaints that I hear is, why are we going after a particular project? We don't have the equipment, we don't have the tools, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the competency level. So I think contractors are over ambitious and don't really put together a proper strategy that's really aligned with their strengths, right? So relying too heavily on cash to fund projects, which is something that we came up with as well, is a lot of contract. Well, let me start off by saying this: most contractors don't even have the cash or the cash flow to go after the growth strategy that they want or the vision that they want for the company as well. So you really need to understand that as well. If you're a $10 million subcontractor and you want to get to $50 million, you're going to need a really good cash flow for that. So what is your financial stack at that very moment? What's your line of credit looking like as well? Just like real estate, there's good debt and there's bad debt as well. So understanding that is crucial. It's imperative to your growth strategy. Technology, I think a lot of contractors like to keep up with the Jones, so they start purchasing all this crazy technology that is not aligned with their business, right? And then there's those contractors who are kind of stuck in the old school ways of Excel spreadsheets and not investing properly in the proper technology that will help them streamline and reduce the redundancy that is typical in construction companies. And then I already touched up on it a little bit as well, but the final bullet point is not accounting for the cost of capital. So I'm really big with estimating, and I can tell you this: a lot of contractors don't account for the cost of borrowing money. They don't really. I'm sure Josh will be able to expand on this more coming from the CFO world. Is they don't have a proper cash flow spreadsheet that they're able to understand what they have available versus what project they want to pursue versus the projects that they actually have going on, and able to predict when that project that they're going to pursue is going to start cash flow, and then understanding how much cash they actually need to borrow and accounting for that cost of borrowing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Jerry, you bring up a great point. Our last subcontractor meetup, we had Josh kind of working tactically through how you can account for the cost of capital. It's a really great meetup. We'll be sure to send that link out as well to the on-demand version. So, Josh, kind of switching gears to you, when you're talking to your clients, how do you identify some of these common growth mistakes, and what is that conversation like when trying to help address what their growth plan is now and what it might need to evolve to?
Yeah, a lot of the accounting side is really easy to see when you just look at a balance sheet, right? You can see how things are flowing. You can see what their accounts receivable, accounts payable, how far behind they get. And I try to explain it to newer owners that are just kind of experiencing this stuff, like, or maybe not newer owners, but people that are new to experiencing this problem because they've had so much work or they've been able to, cost like cash it themselves, is think of it like your personal income. You have all your cash in your bank, but if you don't pay your mortgage, your house is going to be foreclosed upon. If you don't pay your credit card bill, you're going to have a 30% interest. So you have to think about, you need to have just options. If you can't, for some reason, pay your people for that week, they're going to leave. And that's your asset that pays everything else. They're the ones that actually make the money. So you need to have an option, some capital options in your capital stack that allow you to kind of keep going. And then you have to think, who's going to pay for that 30%? Because if I'm not paid within net 30 or, pay when paid, if it's net 45, if I'm not paid within 50 days, I was banking on that. So to Jerry's point, a cash flow forecast is the top tool that you need to at least see those problems before they come up. Because it's not like you just go apply for a credit card and tomorrow you can spend it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in doing some of our own research and a survey we do for our annual subcontractor market report, we found that even in 2024, just barely over half of subcontractors are accounting for the cost of capital in their bids. So let's move on to, we know what these growth mistakes are. So Josh, I'll start with you. How can these negatively affect a subcontracting business and hold these subs back from reaching their growth goals?
Yeah, so I'll dive into the cash flow side immensely and then let Jerry kind of do the operation side. But what I always see is businesses kind of throw a big net. They shotgun approach it where they just bid everything, right? They don't have a niche. They don't really know exactly what they want to do. They shotgun to everybody, and then they think, I'll pick my niche as I get more business, but I have to do something now. And so then you start getting a variety of all these projects, and you think you only have 2, but then you have 10. And the problem isn't like the winning the work, it's supporting the work, it's funding it. So when you take on 10 projects or say 1 project, you have to pay for that month. Say you start in January, you have to pay all of January labor, all of February labor before you're hopefully paid March 5th or 7th or something like that, whatever your pay when paid terms are. Because when you bill for January, it doesn't get submitted to the owner until February and then paid in March to the GC. And when you have all your materials, you have all your equipment, you have all your general expenses, your software, your trucks, everything has to be paid for. And when you compound that between 5 projects, 3 projects, whatever that is, that might be $50,000 per project that you have to front before you get paid a single dollar. So cash flow is more important than profit, in the aspect that without the cash flow, you can go bankrupt before you get any of that profit anyway. So you have to be really careful. As far as like technology, it's really helpful to leverage that to lower and reduce your overhead costs. If I can have AI, if you want to go that far, or if you can have somebody like a virtual assistant or a program like Procore or something like that do work that would take a typical person 40, 30 hours a week, it's so much more efficient to just pay for that software than it is to just have that overhead burden. And the inconveniences of somebody taking vacation, people are awesome to have. They're a company's number one asset, but there's always that time where your accounting person wants to take a vacation and it's during payroll. And now you have to figure out how to do that. So if you have a software that kind of does that stuff for you, it makes it so you don't drop any balls.
Absolutely. And Josh, before we move to some of the operational side with Jerry, do you have any examples of clients you've worked with who have seen their businesses negatively impacted by not having a good handle on their cash flow?
Every one of them. It's typical, right? It's like the start of the year with the tariffs and the new administration, and not to get political, but there was a lot of uncertainty out there. So last year was a really great year for a lot of businesses. And then you get to the slow part, normally in the winter and the um, holiday season, things slow down. We're going to make a decision in January or February. Well, now people are still like, I'm not sure if I'm going to start the project because I don't know what the tariffs are going to do. I don't know what this is going to do. And so you have a lot of problems with your cash flow. You were anticipating getting these projects, so you keep bidding and bidding. But now you have to tell people no. And that's probably the hardest thing for businesses to do, is tell a general contractor, like, I know you plug my number, but like, I can't handle it anymore. So in my opinion, communication is it's a top way to get through that. If you just let general contractors know as you're bidding, like, hey, I only have capacity for 3 projects, right? I have 20 people available, and once I fill up, like, I can't take another one. So if you can push your client to be faster and decide, that's how I help my clients kind of get into those niches. Because if you're over communicating that, you're going to over communicate everything in a project, and a GC would love to work with you, from what I've seen.
For sure. Jerry, kind of moving to the operational side, I'd love to get some examples from you as well of some of the clients you work with, and how those, growth mistakes we talked about, relying too heavily on cash, not investing in the right technology for your business, overcommitting resources. How have you seen your clients be negatively impacted by having those practices in place?
So, I mean, without cash flow, without profits, you just don't have the money to hire good teams, right? And without teams, you're not going to have predictable results. So, to be successful, it boils down to being predictable. So, how do you become predictable is by having a good strategy in place, a good vision that everybody understands as well, right? So, again, I speak to a lot of the employees of these companies, and the owners have these very aggressive growth plans, but these plans are never really expressed to all the employees at all levels. And there's many opportunities that you could actually do that. So what happens is that employees are not making decisions that are in the benefit of the company, right? So without good teams, without good employees, I don't care how great your cash flow is, I don't care how great your profits are.
Mm-hmm.
Without teams, you're not going to have profits, right? As far as clients, I mean, I would say 85% of them are struggling with profits and cash flow. The construction field altogether in the past 20 years has just, I think the competition has really amplified. It's just it's a lot more competitive. Very few contractors I speak to have an actual sweet spot. You know, they're always going against 10, 15, 20 different bidders. You know, the GCs, since we're on a build webinar and we're focused on subcontractors, a lot of GCs don't communicate with subcontractors why they are not getting projects as well. So it becomes very stressful. And Josh was talking about it before. They're pumping out all these bids and they really don't know how many of these bids they're actually going to get, because they don't find out until 2-3 months down the line. So, you know, on the flip side of not having a good backlog, some of these contractors are getting hit with 5, 6, 7 jobs all at once. So that also increases the problem of cash flow as well, because most contractors don't have enough cash in the bank to actually cash flow those projects as well. Or if you get an award, you're told, okay, well, you know, it's March 24th today. You know, you're told to figure that you're going to mobilize on June 1st, and then that turns into July 1st, and that turns into August 1st, right? So now there's that whole side of the cash flow issue as well. So I mean, as far as operations goes, there's what you're bidding today. You think you have a certain amount of resources available, including your teams, and then understanding how that all plays out as these schedules start to shift.
Sure. And to your point, in a competitive environment, I think that you really need to have a strong plan in place. So that's a pretty good segue into our next topic. I think we've spent enough time talking about the negative. So let's go more to the positive side. And Jerry, I'll start with you on this question. What are some of the ways that subcontractors can set themselves up to grow their business sustainably?
So first of all, it starts with strategic planning, right? So, you know, last year we had this thing called an election year, right? Most contractors did not plan for that second half of the election year. If you were one of my clients in 2023, I can guarantee you that I was talking to you about an election year, right? So what happens is investors start pulling money, and then the back end of the year starts to decline. Now a lot of contractors are in a feast and famine state. But aside from that being a part of your strategic plan, what is your vision for the company, right? What are the relationships that need to happen in order for you to get to where you want to go? What's your business development look like? Unless you're in a rip and read world, well, as far as subcontractors go, even if you're in the public sector and you're in the rip and read world, that mainly applies to the GC. As a subcontractor, you're still getting your jobs on your numbers and also on your relationships, right? So again, back to teams. Your teams are going to allow you to get predictable project success on your projects, and then removing any bottlenecks, right? So what is a bottleneck? A bottleneck is when the owner still feels like they need to be out in the field every single day and micromanage everybody out in the field. You need to know when to start hiring and who to hire, when to hire a controller, when to hire a CFO, when you need to start expanding on your project management and start hiring a senior project manager who overlooks each of your project managers as well, and then eventually a COO, right? And then your financials. What are your KPIs? In the subcontractor world, you're obviously a labor-intensive contractor. Are you actually tracking labor? So there's two sides of that. There's the accounting side of tracking your financials and your costs, and then there's the labor side of the equation as well, which is what it's more operations, it's more your supers and or your foremen that are tracking those costs, and then your project managers have some kind of a template in real time where they're actually able to track on a per week or a bi-weekly basis when they need to pivot. A lot, I come from a large construction world, and I could tell you this: a lot of project managers used to complain and say, "Why are we waiting 6 months to find out that a particular operation is going south?" Well, you can't really, if you're a large contractor, you can't really rebound when you're 6 months into an operation and you're in negative numbers as well. Also, and I'm going to leave off on this is your culture, right? You need a culture of accountability. people need to understand exactly what their role, what they're supposed to be doing day in and day out, that's supposed to be driving your company to success. And what's that look for your company? There's a lot of contractors who just lack accountability in their businesses. And it comes from a culture of accountability as well. So when you have a structured meeting, I hate meetings, but you have to have meetings. If you have a structured meeting, everyone needs to come to that meeting with certain solutions to problems, not just problems. And that comes with a culture of accountability as well. And it comes with proper training and proper support as well. So I could talk for hours on this. I'll pass the mic to you guys on this.
Gary, we know you could. So we talked a little bit about, kind of investing in that operational efficiency and creating a culture of accountability. Josh, I'd love to hear from your perspective. You had mentioned some of the struggles that subcontractors have around their capital stack. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of, trying to diversify your capital options, as well as, why is it important to go ahead and proactively get these options before you need them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I always have the conversation of, we need to start with the end in mind. Where do we want to go? What's it look like when we're successful at the end of the year or in 10 years? And that's really hard for a lot of people to think about, because maybe they want to sell the business, or they want to give it to their kids, or they want to retire, or maybe they want to 10x. I have a lot of companies that come to me and they're like, I want to be 100 million in 10 years. And that's really great. We can achieve that, but is revenue really the goal? Because revenue just leads to a lot of problems and a lot of things. So when you think about sustainability and getting to your capital stack question, it really hinges on your accounting software, right? So I know that you know this, and probably everybody that's on here, because I talk to Build, knows this, but you're going to be asked for a balance sheet, an income statement, profit and loss, a WIP report, all these different financial documents. And if we know that, the end is we want to be approved for a loan, right? We want to be approved for $1 million, because that would help us get through. We could bid, $5 million worth of work and be able to sustain it. And maybe we're not using all of it, but we at least have the capability. So if we know that's the end goal, how do we get there? Well, we need our WIP report to show to companies like Build, or our bank, or any line of credit, that, we're financially responsible. Every project is just risk, and it's a matter of how quickly can we mitigate that risk. And like Jerry said, your biggest risk is labor. So if we know material is what material costs, we should just procure all of that immediately. And then you get to the labor side. Then you just have to kind of manage week in, week out specifications, RFIs, like keeping the project front of mind and keeping it progressing instead of letting it sit in your court. But I'll digress on that part. The financial, it all comes down to, a lot of times people will undersell their growth goals and then overshoot them almost intentionally. Like, hey, I want to hit 10% growth this year. And that's a great number. But then they end up going to, like, from 30 million, their goal is to get to 33. And that's just one more project, one small project. But then they end up going 30% more, and that's to 39 million. Well, to absorb another $9 million of capital, 30% of your revenue in 1 year is really hard to do for any company. And you have to have really sound financials to do that. So if your goal was 10%, you need to not take it too high. You need to understand that. And you just need to use numbers to kind of back yourself and decide, hey, I'm really profitable in this sweet spot. I'm going to do this, and then stay in your lane. If you want to grow 30%, say you want to grow 30% and plan to grow 30%, not plan to grow 10 and then happen to get 30.
Sure. Before we move on to our next question, Jerry, I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned earlier about that it's important for subs to pursue projects that align with their strengths. If you were talking to a client that maybe is struggling a little bit to figure out what exactly their strengths are, what sort of advice would you give to them?
Well, first, you need to identify exactly what your niche are. is, right? You know, a lot of contractors want to start taking on all these different kinds of packages, and I help clients build upon their packages as well. But there's a lot of contractors who, you know, if they're a roofing contractor, next thing you know, they want to start pouring foundations. Well, that's just two totally different extremes, right? So first you want to understand what you want your reputation to be known as. What are those couple of words that when somebody says ABC Construction, they are known for, you know, A, B, C, well, no pun intended, right? But what exactly do you want your reputation to be known as? And then from there, what exactly do you want your niche to be? Now, you could expand your niche and you could start expanding your services as well. But you really need to understand that as a subcontractor, you are a labor-intensive contractor. So your laborers and your skilled trades can only do so much. And you don't want to overextend yourself by being a jack of all trades as well. So I can tell from my own personal experience working with the contractors that I have, there was one in particular that kind of wanted to go after all different kinds of scope of work. But when we landed that work, which it's a lot easier to bid and win that project, it's a lot harder to actually execute that project because your managers and your trades out in the field don't really fully understand the ins and the outs of that as well. So my top advice is just understand what you want your reputation to be known as, and niche down into that as well. And that's going to come from clarity of really understanding what your strengths and your weaknesses are at your current state, understanding where you want to go and what gaps you need to fill to go there. But you know, to Josh's point, don't be chasing your top revenue. You got to make sure that your bottom line is healthy. And reverse engineer from there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So, you know, Josh, I'll kind of flip back to you to start on this one. You know, you've kind of set the stage for how subs can create this sustainable growth plan. How is that going to benefit subcontractors in the long run?
Yeah, so a lot of times, like a contractor I'm working with in San Francisco, right? He came to me and he wants to do 100 million in 10 years, and that's awesome. But what I asked him was, when you get there, how much profit are you expecting? And he's thinking, you know, 10%. Well, if we can find you a niche, which is like to Jerry's point, your bottom line will dictate your niche. It'll tell you if you're making profit on a project, then you're good at that. So stick with it. And although this guy in San Francisco is union and he can get union guys that know how to do any different aspect of electrical, he doesn't have the niche himself to do the business development or the background to necessarily do high-rise construction or data centers. But if he's just throwing up bids to everything and then industrial and commercial, I mean, there's so many options you can go into. A niche is not a general trade. It is a specific area. And his background was EV chargers and underground and traffic signals. So you know what? Why don't you bid those? Because you know there's like, 4 other people in the whole city that bid those. Plus, they're all massive companies. So your overhead's much less. You have a very good chance of doing that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jerry, I'd kind of ask you the same thing. You know, how have some of your clients been able to, you know, what benefits have they seen from, you know, investing in the practices that support sustainable growth?
Well, you know, again, as far as operations goes, the biggest investment is in your people, is in training as well. You know, something that we didn't really talk much about is training, right? You could always train for skills. Accountability comes from and within, so that comes with really hiring the right people. But training is a great way to actually talk about your backlog ahead and kind of go through the operations as well. I've been really getting involved with AI. I use it every single day, and I'm helping more and more clients kind of understand what kind of data can we collect on a day-to-day basis, where you can use AI to create phenomenal on-point presentations based on real-world situations where you could take your people and bring them into the office quarterly, every 6 months, even at the end of the year, and talk about your backlog that you have ahead, and start going through the operations that you actually have, and start nurturing the younger minds, especially the more unseasoned, and use this real world experience within the indoors of your business, and start role playing, and start going through your operations. So there's many ways where you can train your people as well. Everybody thinks that it costs more money, it's too time consuming. It really is not. It's just, I don't understand why nobody wants to. There's a big discrepancy with mentors also. Start assigning seasoned employees to mentor your unseasoned employees, and start delegating those tasks to them as well. So that's certainly a way that a lot of contractors can build and grow their teams. So I'll stop at that.
For sure. And Josh, I had one more question for you on this topic. In addition to benefits like higher profit margins, improved cash flow, how does a sustainable growth model help subs to improve relationships with suppliers, with GCs, et cetera?
Yeah. So what I've noticed a lot of times is that clients get behind on paying because they aren't being paid. And when you really figure out your growth model and you identify your target market, you'll identify the target GCs you like in that market. So instead of going and building connected and bidding to 10 people, you're going to give your bid to the 3 that you want to win. You might give it to everybody else at a 20, 30% higher rate, because if you work with them, it's going to cost 20 to 30% more with their safety plan or all of their disorganization. But at the end of the day, you can kind of direct where that goes. And back to the earlier point, all of that, what that does, when you want to go to 100 million at 10%, that's 10 million. But if you're at 30 million at 30%, that's also 10 million. And which one's easier to manage? A $100 million company or a $30 million company? That's ultimately where I try to imagine what's the easiest way to get you to your goal. If your goal is just to have a big company, take on all the revenue you want, that's up to you. That's a lot of stress. I don't want to deal with that myself. But if you want to get to a really profitable place where you can pay people, like Jerry said, you can get the best people because you can pay them more, and they're efficient and they're happy, and you want to create that kind of a culture. That's my niche. That's where I like to work with people, because when I have to interact with you every day, I want you to be happy because it feeds into my life and my family at home too.
Yeah. Josh, if I could just say one thing, it's funny when I look back at all the discovery calls that I've had with a contractor, which are my initial conversations with them, and I ask them, what are your goals for the next 12 to 18 months? And they talk about their revenue. It's always about revenue. Nobody ever speaks about, I want to start making a solid 10% profit on every single project. Mm-hmm. And I wonder why. Why is it that everybody is so in tune with revenue versus profit? Like I can, you brought up a great point. A $30 million a year business is a lot easier to manage than a $100 million a year business. It's a lot less people, right? It's a third of the amount of risk.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you think about it, like from the project management side, so that's my background is operational and doing like Google data centers. I mean, to run one Google data center at $300 million electrically is a lot harder than running 5, $7 million projects at around 30, 35 million. I mean, I can do that individually, but if you're doing a $300 million project, you have to have 10 PMs under one senior PM just to manage all the scope. And then you have HR and all these other things. And it's so much more expensive and intensive. So I don't know. From my experience, what I've seen, the most profitable contractors are from that 30 to 50 million range. And then you kind of top out and you stay there. If you go much more corporate than that, there's a lot more risk that gets involved when you have more trucks and more people, and it snowballs. It's Murphy's Law in construction. If it's going to go wrong, it's going to happen to you. So just count on it.
Yeah, every contractor needs to grow at least 10% a year to stay ahead of inflation. The contractors say, I don't want to grow anymore. That is a little bit of a red flag for me as well. Well, I get you don't want to maybe grow aggressively anymore, but you got to grow at least 10% a year to stay ahead of inflation.
That's fair.
As well. I know many contractors who are sitting at 20, 25 million. They're like, I just don't want to grow anymore because I'm making my solid 10 to 15% and it's predictable, which is fantastic. So let's really understand where that exactly is coming from. And that's where you got to have certain KPIs in place. And again, back to the strengths, is really understand what your strengths are and double down on your strengths. I think what keeps a contractor sustainable is when they stay within their lane, right? When you start navigating too much, back to the old, roofing, and then I want to start pouring foundations, a scenario that I said before, that's where contractors really start to go off on a tangent and they really fall apart. Also, a lot of owners just don't take the time every year to kind of reassess where they're at and really understand what they need to be doubling down on and I'm really identifying their weaknesses and how to offset those weaknesses as well. I mean, that is probably one big takeaway that I would love contractors to hear as far as what I have to say in this webinar is, every year you really need to get your core people in a room and spend 2 to 3 days pretty much going through your entire business. What did you do great that year? What did you not do great that year? Who are your ideal clients? Break them out into tiers. What type of work did we really do well at, excel at, right? Who's nurturing your client relations? If you're the type of business that has a business developer, are you actually nurturing your client relations, or are you just forgetting about that client when they award you a project? Right? I can tell you this, if you have someone in place, especially the owner, right? Because the owner is the face of the company. If they're calling up a client who that job probably is not doing too well, and you call them up and you just have a good conversation with them, it's an awkward conversation, but I can tell you and I can guarantee you that a lot of what that client is feeling, that resentment that they're feeling, is gonna get pushed to the side. They're going to know that you care about the project. They're going to know that you actually care about your reputation. Again, back to the reputation, right? Because, it depends on what market you're in. If you've been following me on LinkedIn, you'll see I get posts all the time about how the windmill work. It's got to be the bottom number. And that's it, or it's the reputation and that's it. And then there's those contractors who kind of find that neutral ground. It's a mix of both. But if you don't know what you're great at, then you don't know what kind of job you can kind of dip a little bit with as well, or what kind of job you can leverage more of a relationship with and not dip on.
Yeah, and to your point about to growing 10%, I definitely agree with that. I think that there's so many ways you can grow, and that 10% is kind of like, we always think of numbers, but you could think of it also as like the business development.
Right.
There's always cycles we have where there's a lot of growth and then there's a recession, right? And we all and what I try to work with my clients on is you want to do both. You want to grow, but you also want to focus on, like, how do we re-engineer our company? How do we fix it? How do we get the right people in the right seats? Like if you follow the EOS model, how do we get things to be more efficient? Because if you are stuck at 20 million, you don't have to grow 10% revenue. You could just grow, 5% profit on that 20 million. And now you're, instead of 2 million, you're at 3 million profit. And you did no extra work. You just refined your process. You got really good at what you're doing. So like you're saying, like, just niche down, figure that out, exploit your strengths and work on your weaknesses at the same time.
Yeah, I'm really happy you said that, because it's, it's not about 10% top revenue. I mean, it's a matter of, Listen, even whether you're a solopreneur, which is not the case for contractors, or whether you have 50 employees, there's always better ways to do things, right? So you can grow by staying the same for a couple of years in revenue, but by improving your operations and improving your efficiency and improving how you actually close your deals on the pre-construction side of things as well. A lot of contractors train the people that are actually giving them jobs by just taking money out of their profits instead of trying to navigate that conversation as, hey, let's value engineer the project so you can make more money and then I can make more money as well. Like, to me, that's a true partnership rather than saying, hey, you got to drop 5% from your bottom line number and then I'll give you the job. So, that's a way to grow as well, is by refining that process.
Sorry, Mark, we hijacked you.
No, you guys actually teed it up just right for our last topic of the day, which is about goal setting. And so, Josh, I would start with you. When you're working with your clients and trying to help them set realistic growth goals, what does that look like to set goals that they can actually achieve and that will also be beneficial to their business?
Yeah, so I'm not officially like the EOS person. I do like to use EOS because it takes your 10-year goal and it breaks it into 3-year goals, and then it breaks it into annual and then quarterly. So you actually know, if I want my profit in 10 years to be 20%, for example, I know that quarterly I have to also meet 20%. Otherwise, I'm just going to be aligning with clients that are a race to the bottom. So it helps you move the needle doing the things you actually want to do. Now, the second part of that, and I don't want to just harp on the capital stack because this is a build thing, but that's so important. You have to have something in place to have a backdrop. Otherwise, the bottom can drop out from you. I guarantee everybody on this call has had one project that lingers for 6 to 12 months to get paid. And if you're relying on every project to get paid within 60 days or 90 days, you're going to hit that project that's going to bankrupt your company. From a time and material ticket that might be $300,000. I have a civil contractor that I work with in South Carolina, and he knew the people. He was a good old boy. That's the system they worked. I tried to help with the contract side of it a little bit, but at the end of the day, he did $320,000 worth of time and material of agreed upon rock removal in his contract, and then the general contractor had a pay when paid clause. They basically said, well, we haven't been paid for it. Come to find out 6 months later, so this was all completed in July, come to December, we found out they didn't even submit the change order because they didn't have that agreement for those rates in their prime contract, and they were afraid of the owner. So those are the kind of things that'll bankrupt your company every time. I don't know how he made it out of that because that's a big hole to just absorb $320,000 for a year. But he did. We moved on and we found his niche, and now he's naming his price. You have people call you and you're like, hey, it'll be 30% above, and they'll say that's high, and you're like, yeah, but I'm going to show up. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to fix it if I do it wrong, and that me. What I'm going to do, and then we have a contract that backs all of that up. But that helps, and to get through those moments, if you can't financially sustain $500,000 to grow, say $500,000 is what, 30% of like 3.5 million roughly, or 2.5 million. You can't grow to 3.5 million unless you have that available. And whether that's all cash or whether that's partially credit, you need to have options. And so you begin with the end in mind. Where do I want to be in 10 years? Break that down into 3-year goals. Then break that down into annual and then quarterly, and then plan ahead. This quarter, I have to get set up for another 500,000 in working capital, because at the end of the year or next year, I want to do 500,000 more. So I have to have that capital available, or maybe I want to do 2.5 million more, whatever that capital equals out to be.
Yeah. And it sounds like the more granular and meticulous you can be in that planning, the better off you'll be, and the more realistic your growth goals will end up being.
Hmm. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's all about being realistic. And I think that in America, we're kind of in this trap of, and I did this back all the way since science class in like fourth grade, but you make a hypothesis. I think that this is going to happen. And so that's how you make your goals. But you shortchange your goals because you want to achieve them because it's a check mark that you can do. But that's not a goal. That's just a check the box. That's just a day-to-day task. And if it's something like I want to make $50 today, like, well, that's freaking easy. Of course you can make $50. If all you want to do is check a box and say that's good enough, like that's great. But if you want to set goals, you have to stretch a little bit, but you don't say I want to make 300 million in 2 years. Like that doesn't work, right? So the realism kicks in when it's so obvious. But if you haven't done this and you haven't seen what works or how quickly things build, then you can't just know offhand like I'm going to be able to do 100 million in 10 years, because I'll tell you that's not the norm. That's not something that somebody can give you a magic pill. That's market dependent. That's a lot of things, right? So you have to be realistic, and hiring somebody like Jerry is probably a really good fit for that. You want to make sure that you talk to somebody who's done it and seen it and can fill you in with like, this is not possible. And I think that's the biggest thing in like a consultant is, here's what's real. Here's something that's tangible. I'm not going to lie to you and just sell you a pipe dream, because I hate that when people do that to me. And I know that all of us hate that when people do that to us.
Yeah, I think we can definitely all relate to that. Jerry, I'd like to ask you this question in a bit of a different way. When you're working with clients, they've got a growth plan in place. How often do you recommend they revisit that growth plan? And how do you what are your conversations like if they are not reaching those goals and maybe need to adjust them?
I like to work in more bite-sized strategies, right? So I don't like to build out strategies beyond 18 or so months. I want to hear your vision for the next 3+ years or so. I'll be honest, I've never had a conversation 10 years beyond, just because there's so much that happens in this business. I mean, look at COVID, right? But just look at how different the world is today compared to 6 months ago. Again, back to the election, right? So I like to build strategies out not beyond 18 or so months, just because I feel that a lot of contractors trip on their own thoughts because they're not bite-sized goals. So let me just explain that a little bit more. So, the way I build out my strategies is, one, I want to understand your vision, right? What do you want to be known as? And also, how do you want your own personal life to look as well? What are the 3 to 4 strategies that really need to be in place that are aligned with your vision, that are going to move the needle for your company to move it in the direction that you want? And then let's break out each quarter of the next 12+ months to 4 or 5 top 6 goals that are aligned with, and which strategy is each of those goals aligned to. But here's where the real magic happens is, let's put a success metric to each goal so we actually know we're hitting the goals. I think that right there, that one step right there, will really help any kind of contractor in any business really feel motivated, let me say, as they're moving along, because they know that they're actually hitting their goals because they have a success metric that's tied to it. A lot of contractors are like, I have all these plans. It's been 1 year, it's been 2 years, now it's 3 years, and I haven't gone anywhere. I'm right back to where I was. And maybe they are accomplishing some of those goals, but they have nothing in writing. They have nothing on a simple piece of paper that's actually telling them that they're getting closer to their vision, right? And it makes them lose motivation, or it also keeps them from staying focused as well. I'm going to be a little biased here, but that's also the reason why a lot of contractors hire consultants, right? Is because they help them keep their thumb on their vision, right? So Josh is in the back, and he's watching the money as you're doing your thing out on the field, right? So that's where people like us can come in as well.
Yeah, I don't want to say my people are lazy, but it's definitely like it's hard to look at everything. Like being a business owner like you are and I am, like I don't know how to market very well. It takes me 50 hours to market a week. But, finance, it takes me about an hour and a half. Like that's easy.
Yeah.
So you just pick your niche, you find somebody that does the other parts as well.
Right. It's breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. I mean, when I just started my business, I hired a business coach, and it was like, Jerry, stop worrying about too much where you're going to be in 3 years from now, because you're going to look in 3 years from now and you're going to look back and you're going to say, holy crap, I've really gone a long ways.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of understand what you want to accomplish in the next couple of months to a year and just start chewing away at it. And take it one bite at a time, and just know when you're actually hitting those goals. And again, back to the success metrics, those are really, really important dopamine hits that kind of keep you aligned with your goal and make you feel like you're actually moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Would love to set up a little bit of a Q&A. So for everyone on the event, if you have any questions, you can go to the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of your screen and pop in those questions, and we'll get those addressed. While we're waiting for those, Jerry, I did want to dig into a little bit more on the success metrics that you mentioned. So apart from, simply revenue numbers or profit margin, what are some KPIs that you recommend subcontractors measure?
Well, as far as KPIs go, I mean, the ultimate KPI for a subcontractor is measuring their labor, right? So it's the labor, and then there's the accounting aspect of it too. But even to break it out a little bit more, a lot of what I help contractors with is kind of realigning roles and responsibilities, realigning those processes that must be in place. I'm not a massive process person, but there are certain tasks that have to get done that every single person with that organization must follow that same process that will move the company forward. Mm-hmm. So success metric for something like that is, okay, so in Q1, we're going to establish the process, and then you can break that out into implement with 1 to 2 teams. So the success metric is establishing it, then implement it with 1 to 2 teams, and maybe just add a couple of words of how that actually looks for your company, and then what that actual success metric is. Then break it out into 4 to 5 teams, which is the next quarter. So again, it's bite-sized goals. It's not implement 10 new processes in your company, and that's not a bite-sized goal. If you're a large contractor and you're a $50 to $100 million a year contractor and above and beyond, you always want to implement new strategies by starting with your early cheerleaders, the people that actually believe in what you want to achieve is actually going to work, right? Mm-hmm. So you want that initial 1 or 2 teams to be your early cheerleaders, and then from there you can kind of expand where now you can train another 1 or 2 teams, and then that new early team can start training 1 or 2 teams on their own. So that's what I mean by bite-sized goals, is kind of understanding exactly what you want, which is your vision. What are the 3 to 4 strategies, and then breaking out those strategies into actionable steps, actionable goals for the next 12 or so months. So was that along the lines of kind of expanding on what you wanted, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh, we just had a question come in that I'd like to pose to you. Casey asks, how can you structure your contract with your GC to avoid a bad time and material situation?
So what I did with the civil contractor, because obviously at that point he realizes, hey, in the future, I never want this to happen again. So that's the trigger for most people, is this happened to me, now I have to do it. So you always want to, every year, create a time and material template of what is your manpower, what is a foreman, what is a super or PM, all of your equipment. And then obviously you're going to quote materials as you go through. But what I do is we do that every year. So 2025, you just make a new one. Now, every contract we negotiate from this point on, I add that as an exhibit, right? So if it's exhibit B or whatever, now it's in the contract. Now they can never argue with us about our rates ever throughout the whole project. They're already fixed. So now it's just a matter of proving the time. Now you get a time and materials ticket, you have to have them sign it twice is the best practice. Once is this person is signing that I am now going to do this work today in my time and material ticket because I am authorized to do this work and you're authorized to tell me to do this work. And second is at the end of the day, you're authorizing that, yes, I did this work. This is how long it took. This is all the material. Now, I will say I hate T&M because you always miss something. Superintendents will not put down, like I did electrical, they won't put down wire nuts. They won't put down the extra safety time. They won't put down extra truck time. All of those things have a cost, fuel, but they're not tangible where a GC can say, yep, you used 3 gallons of gas today in your truck and you spent an extra 60 minutes in your truck or using your truck to go get material or whatever it might be, right? But that shouldn't be in your base bid. That's an adjustment. That's everything that's above and beyond the contract that was executed on day one. So and the other thing that goes into all of this is you have to be accountable to your own contract. So it always has in there, you have 10 days or 10 business days or whatever it might be for your changes. And you need to hold them accountable to that. And if they don't give you your paperwork by then you have to like send them a stop work notice and a notice of non-payment. And you have to get with a legal team to do that stuff properly in your state. But what that does is it sends the message to this GC, like, I'm not here to mess around. I'm here to do your job. And you told me to do it. Now you're not paying me for it. I'm not going to risk my company going out of business and staying on your site, continuing, because some of these T&Ms could last 6 months. Like that rock removal, that pushed the schedule so far out because there was so much rock that had to be removed and then backfilled with 57 stone. All of that was just time and material. Well, if you're not going to pay me month 1 because you want to lump it together for month 3, like that's not acceptable. My contract is not an open-ended time and material ticket that I'm going to front until you deem it necessary to pay me. So you have to make that gray area of the contract really black and white so they can't push back on you.
For sure. We are running a little bit short on time. So before I ask our last Q&A question, just wanted to open up a poll. I think we're going to skip this. I'm going to open up a poll, and this poll is if you would like to get in touch with us with Build, with Josh at Sulphur Prairie Management, or with Jerry at Pro-Accel. You can go ahead and submit that poll. Give me 1 second here. All right, that one is published and is open. So go ahead and vote on that if you'd like to get in touch with us. And then my last question is, we actually will go back. And so, with just about a minute each left, Josh and Jerry, it's a big topic, but what's one piece of advice that you would give to subcontractors who are looking to set themselves up for sustainable growth? Let's start with you, Jerry, and then go to Josh.
Focus on your bottom line revenue. Don't get caught up with trying to grow on your top line. Just become as efficient as possible. Everybody's complaining about the lack of skilled management, the lack of skilled trade. It's up to you to put the skill in skilled management and skilled trade. So focus on training, understand what you have, understand what your strengths are, become as efficient as possible so you can cash flow as much as possible and make as much profits as possible, and then start hiring your best possible people.
Mm-hmm.
And what about from you, Josh?
I agree 100% with Jerry on that. But I'm going to say construction accounting because you want to see why and see where the problem is. And like a lot of people use QuickBooks. That's awesome for first time people in the industry. But when you hit a certain peak, like you can't track anything. You can't track labor. It gives you lump sums. You can see I have a $1 million contract and I've spent $800,000. Well, have you been billed for everything? Have you paid all your labor? Is it true cost or was something miscoded into there? Like you never know. It's just at the end of the year, which you'll never know because projects don't go from January 1 to December 31st and then cut off and give you a nice clean show, like if you sell t-shirts, that's easy, right? I know it cost me $30 to make one and $50 to sell one. So whatever, I made $20, but you can't ever see that in construction unless you build in construction accounting and have cost coding to track every single thing. Not necessarily too granular, but not necessarily a lump sum either. Otherwise you're never going to get anywhere. And like Jerry said, you want to have key metrics, and that's how you measure finance, is looking at the numbers, not do I have money in my bank account to pay this today.
For sure. Well, we are just about out of time, but before we let you guys go, I'd like to let Jerry and then Josh just tell us a little bit about their businesses.
So in a nutshell, I help contractors stop losing money on inefficiencies so they can grow more profitably and sustainably. I'm hot and heavy on LinkedIn, or you can reach me at Jerry with a J, Jerry at pro-accel.com.
Excellent. Josh?
Yeah, I'm Josh with the Construction CFO. I focus on finances. I focus on how do I make this easy for you to see in your numbers, because they're all unique to you. How do I find your overhead? How do we predict your cash flow? How do we fix that stuff? And I get in as deep as I'll read contracts. I'll help negotiate contracts. I'll help build processes like Jerry, although he's probably a lot better at the field side and all of that. I have a project management background, and I like to help people actually do the work instead of a typical, and I know Jerry's not like this, but like a lot of CFOs out there, they're just accountants that tell you, okay, here's your report. This is how you read it. Good luck. I'll see you in a month. I'm actually in the weeds with you, helping you build that report through the little micro steps that move the needle to get you there so you can get funding, not just tell you, well, you need this report to get funding. Good luck.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Josh, and thank you, Jerry, for a great presentation. Thank you to everybody who joined us today virtually. We will be sending you a recording of the meetup sometime later today or early tomorrow, as well as some other relevant resources. And as always, stay tuned for information on our next meetup and other great build content. Take care and have a great rest of your Monday.